I have grave concerns, not only about the capabilities we have, but the ability to sustain them in terms of ammunition, in terms of spare parts, and in terms of people.
Colleagues and shipmates, the RCN faces some very serious challenges right now that could mean we fail to meet our force posture and readiness commitments in 2024 and beyond.
It's no secret in Canada that the Canadian Armed Forces are in dire straits. The recruitment crisis is well reported across both the legacy media and the independent media. Furthermore, Canada's top generals and admirals willingly go on television and telegraph to our enemies that Canada can't defend itself. Now, you might think that telegraphing Canada's weakness to our enemies all around the world would be a bad idea. But when the Canadian Armed Forces are providing tampons to male soldiers, attacking white soldiers for being white, and attacking military families for upholding the patriarchy, suddenly it appears as though bad ideas are the only ideas coming from the Canadian Armed Forces top brass. After years of pushing this far-left Marxist anti-Canadian ideology on the rank and file, the troops would eventually respond, and it appears that response is happening right now. First, in the form of dangerously low recruiting numbers. In 2022, recruitment was down by 35% compared to last year. And now it appears troops are taking matters into their own hands. At CFB Trenton, in one of the men's washrooms, soldiers removed the tampon dispenser from the bathroom. It's looking as though Canadian troops are now not so interested in being humiliated day after day while serving this country. And good for them. Stick around for more as we dive into the details of what's really going on inside the Canadian Armed Forces. But before we do that, drop a like in the video, help us out by subscribing to the True North YouTube channel, and the comment question for the episode is this: why is the federal government trying to do everything it can to demoralize members of the Canadian Armed Forces? Let me know your answer in the comments below, and let's get into it. Last month, news broke that all Canadian military bases will be providing tampons inside men's washrooms. Because of course, that's exactly what the military needed to try and boost morale. Maybe the reason that no men were signing up for the military was because they were concerned they wouldn't be able to get tampons inside men's washrooms. Now that that's been taken care of, I'm sure we will see recruiting numbers jump back up again. Not all soldiers inside the Canadian Armed Forces enjoy being humiliated day after day. And according to the Department of National Defence, as reported by True North, there have been reports of vandalism occurring on tampon dispensers inside men's washrooms. A Department of National Defence spokesperson told True North in an email, "Unfortunately, vandalism has already been observed on some dispensing units installed in Department of National Defence occupied buildings." The Defense Department said removing tampon dispensers and disposal units from men's washrooms undermines the department's efforts to create an inclusive environment for cisgender women, gender-diverse individuals, transgender men, and intersex individuals. And of course, the military is cracking down on those who are removing these tampon dispensers. It won't be tolerated, according to them. This type of behavior will not be tolerated and goes against defense team efforts to create a truly inclusive and psychologically safe work culture. All members of the defense team must feel recognized, respected, and valued, which will allow them to thrive in their environment. So, removing tampon dispensers from men's washrooms will not be tolerated by the Department of National Defense. It goes against the Department of National Defense's efforts to create a psychologically safe workplace for the military. It appears that the Canadian Armed Forces' efforts to create a psychologically safe work culture inside the military only goes in one direction. That's because in the latest edition of the Canadian Military Journal, the official publication of the Canadian Armed Forces, all throughout that latest edition are direct attacks on white soldiers, demeaning soldiers for the color of their skin, and going so far as to attack military families for upholding the patriarchy. In the latest edition of the Canadian Military Journal, you can read articles written by civilian far-left radical professors like this one: "I'm not your typical white soldier, interrogating whiteness and power in the Canadian Armed Forces." Or perhaps if demeaning white soldiers isn't what you're looking for, you can read an article about how military families are upholding the patriarchy, like this one titled, "Supporting Military Families, Challenging or Reinforcing Patriarchy." You will also find inside the Canadian Military Journal these really positive statements about Canada and what it means to be a soldier in the Canadian military. You'll find that under the glossary for colonialism here. Canada is built on settler colonialism, a distinct form of colonialism that enforces large-scale assimilation and erasures of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis culture and peoples. The Canadian Armed Forces is both a product and an instrument of the white settler colonial state. Furthermore, the military is built on and centers white settler histories and culture. Colonialism manifests in the Canadian Armed Forces through systemic and structured barriers, leading to the low representation of Indigenous and other racialized communities. Colonialism also manifests in the Canadian Armed Forces through racist behaviors, white supremacist attitudes, and in verbal, physical, and sexual violence targeting Indigenous, Black, and people of color military members. Now, these far-left progressive civilian professors don't hide their motivations and don't hide their intent. They state it plainly inside the military journal. Here you can see exactly what they're trying to do inside the military, to push critical race theory and radical gender ideology onto the rank-and-file troops. Integrate critical theories and an anti-oppression framework into professional military education and training, and into all institutional systems, structures, processes, and procedures. Seeing as how the majority of CAF members are white men, how exactly does publishing this garbage in the Canadian Military Journal, which directly attacks soldiers for the color of their skin, create a psychologically safe work culture, as the Department of National Defense so proudly says they're trying to do? So let's just make sure we've got this straight. Removing tampon dispensers in men's washrooms undermines the efforts to create a psychologically safe work culture for all those men who really rely on tampons. But having professors in the official military publication write about how the military is infested with white supremacists is totally fine. Also, for good measure, inside the military journal, you will find a photo of a Canadian soldier communicating with and conferring with a Chinese soldier, the enemy. Literally a photo of Canada communicating with the enemy in the latest edition of the Military Journal. Mind you, all of this is happening while recruitment in the Canadian Armed Forces continues to drop. Like I said before, recruitment in 2022 was down 32% from the year before. Who knows what that number will be for 2023, but one can only assume that the numbers will continue to get worse. Because after all, military leadership have no problem in this country going on television and telling everyone that no one is signing up and there isn't enough money to fund any operations.
The RCN is in a critical state, with many occupations experiencing shortages at 20% and higher. There's a simple reason for this. Despite their very best efforts, CFRG has not delivered the required intake for the RCN for over 10 years. While our overall attrition is generally good, our MARTEC leaves us every 2 days. Our West Coast fleet is beset with a shortage of qualified techs, constraining our ability to maintain and operate our ships and causing us to prioritize the Halifax class at the expense of the Kingston class. Challenges in generating techs for the Harry DeWolf class mean that we could only sail one at a time right now. Preparing to fully crew the first JSS by 2025 is a considerable challenge, but we cannot and will not fail.
In order to try and turn around falling recruitment numbers, the military has relaxed their standards, allowed men to have long hair, face tattoos, colored hair for women, and even colored fingernails. Furthermore, and perhaps worst of all, the military now doesn't even require you to be a citizen of Canada to join the Canadian Armed Forces. That's right, you can be a permanent resident and join the military in this country. So think about this. The military is willing to slander its own rank and file by labeling them racists and white supremacists, while allowing foreigners to enter the military, to have an army of foreigners while slandering the majority of the troops, mostly white men. And according to veterans advocacy group Veterans for Freedom, the military is now reportedly dropping the Canadian Armed Forces aptitude test for 47 of the 100 military occupations. According to Veterans for Freedom, for 47 of the 100 plus military occupations, there is no longer the requirement for passing the Canadian Forces aptitude test. The CFAT tests the applicant's English, math, and spatial awareness, which determines which occupations you are suited for. This is a recipe for disaster, as being able to communicate through a common language is critical to Canadian Armed Forces training and operations. This has most likely been implemented to accommodate the 2,600 permanent residents who, according to our CFRG source, are mostly East Indian, who use broken English and clearly use Google Translate to send emails. Nobody wants to sign up for a military with these relaxed standards, with troops who have colored hair and colored fingernails and face tattoos. Nobody wants to sign up for a military that tells them they're a racist and a white supremacist. Nobody wants to sign up for a military with crap uniforms that don't make them feel good, without any ammunition to practice with. No one wants to sign up to be a soldier where you have to buy your own equipment when you're on deployment. The military is in the warfare business. Quite frankly, it's in the killing of the enemy business. It's not supposed to be in the business of anything else. People who join the military do so because they love this country and they want to serve this country, knowing full well what that means. Watering it down, destroying morale, and giving tampons to male soldiers isn't going to entice anyone of any background or any ethnicity to join the forces. General Rick Hillier, when he was the chief of the defense staff when Canadians were at war in Afghanistan, said it best about what the military's true role is. We are not the public service of Canada. We're not just another department. We are the Canadian Forces, and our job is to be able to kill people. But hey, just keep flying pride flags on naval ships, marching in pride parades, and calling your troops racist. I'm sure eventually this strategy will pay off. All right, everyone, that's going to do it for us today on the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Harrison Faulkner, and this is Ratio.